You want to hear about my dream? Yeah. Good. I'll call you back when I've had it.
There's an unwritten rule in television. You don't mess with the core cast. They're the foundation, the reason we tune in every week. But rules are made to be broken. From bitter contract disputes that spilled onto the screen to brave creative choices that changed television forever. These are the stories of the most shocking character endings that we simply never, ever forgot. 1. Lieutenant Colonel.
That's a decision I'll decide when I decide and make my decision, and that will decide.
Let's kick things off with the undisputed heavyweight champion of shocking sitcom endings. The one that wrote the playbook. The one that, nearly 50 years later, still feels like a raw nerve. We're talking about Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake from MASH. For 3 seasons, Henry Blake, played with such lovable, bumbling warmth by McLean Stevenson, was the beating heart of the 47th Mobile Army Surgical Hospital. Truth be told, he wasn't a great military commander. He was pretty terrible at it. He was just a good-natured doctor from Illinois who wanted to get back home to his family, play a little golf, and maybe do some fishing. He was hopelessly disorganized, easily flustered, and his desk was a monument to chaos. But here's the thing. He was a good man. He was the deeply human, relatable center of a show set against the inhumanity of the Korean War. He was the goofy, laid-back father figure to Hawkeye and Trapper John's rebellious antics, often looking the other way with a sigh and a shake of his head. He cared about his people, and we, the audience, cared about him deeply. In the final episode of Season 3, titled Abyssinia, Henry, the moment we all knew was coming, finally arrived. Henry got his discharge papers. He was going home. The entire episode is a masterclass in heartfelt goodbyes. There are pranks, there are drinks, and there are genuinely touching moments. Henry gives Radar a long, fatherly hug. He gets a surprising and emotional kiss from a tearful Hawkeye. Dressed in a loud, checkered civilian suit that was pure Henry, he walks to the helicopter that will take him on the first leg of his journey home. It was the perfect send-off. We were sad to see him go, but happy he was finally getting his wish. The episode should have ended there, but it didn't. The final scene is one of the most famous and devastating in television history. The surgeons are back in the operating room, exhausted, when a shaken Radar O'Reilly walks in. He's holding a piece of paper, his voice trembling. He interrupts the surgical chatter and delivers the news. I have a message. Lieutenant Colonel Henry Blake's plane was shot down over the Sea of Japan. It spun in. There were no survivors. The reaction in the room was stunned silence. Get this, the actors themselves weren't told about this final scene until minutes before they shot it. Their shock, their disbelief, their grief, it was all real. The camera lingers on their faces as the news sinks in. The episode ends not with a laugh track, but with the quiet, chilling hum of the operating room. A beloved main character on a major American sitcom had met an untimely end. For the audience, it felt like a violation. So, why did they do it? Behind the scenes, actor McLean Stevenson had decided to leave the show. He felt his character was secondary to Alan Alda's Hawkeye and wanted to pursue a leading role in his own series. The writers, Larry Gelbart and Gene Reynolds, could have just let Henry go home to live happily ever after. But they wanted to make a statement. They wanted to remind the audience, who had grown to love these funny, charming characters, that the show was set in a war. And in war, people don't always get to go home. The public reaction was immediate and overwhelming. The network was flooded with thousands of angry letters. Viewers felt betrayed. It was a massive gamble, but it paid off, cementing MASH's legacy as a comedy that wasn't afraid to break your heart to tell a deeper truth. Henry Blake's ending showed the senselessness of war, but another 70s patriarch's departure was meant to send a very different message, one born from a fiery conflict behind the camera. 2. James Evans.
One of the kids had heard you said they was born out of wedlock.
Wouldn't bother me none. I ain't the oldest.
In the 1970s, Good Times was groundbreaking television. A spin-off of Maude, it was one of the first sitcoms to center on a two-parent black family, navigating life and poverty with resilience, love, and a whole lot of humor. The Evans family lived in a housing project in Chicago, and at its core was the unshakable patriarch, James Evans Sr. Played by the powerful and charismatic John Amos, James was the ultimate father. He was a proud, hard-working man who took on any job he could find to provide for his family. He was tough, principled, and deeply devoted to his wife Florida and their three kids, J.J., Thelma, and Michael. James was the family's rock. He instilled discipline, demanded respect, and dreamed of a better life for his children, even if he couldn't always see a way out for himself. His booming voice and unwavering moral compass made him one of the most respected and beloved fathers on television. For 3 seasons, we watched James fight for his family. So, in the season 4 premiere, when it seemed like they finally got their break, we were all cheering. James had landed a great new job in Mississippi, and the family was preparing to leave the projects behind. They were finally moving on up. But then, as Florida and the kids celebrated, a telegram arrived. What followed is one of the single most unforgettable and emotionally raw scenes in sitcom history. Florida reads the telegram, her face falling as she learns that James was in a fatal car accident on his way to his new life. The kids don't understand at first, but when the reality sinks in, the celebration turns to ash. An inconsolable Florida, in a moment of pure, shattering grief, smashes a punch bowl on the floor and screams, "Damn, damn, damn!" It wasn't just a dramatic moment. It was real, human, and utterly gut-wrenching. There was no gentle lead-up, no hospital vigil, just a piece of paper and a life erased. Believe it or not, this tragic turn was the result of intense backstage conflict. John Amos had grown increasingly frustrated with the show's direction. He clashed with the producers, particularly Norman Lear, over the character of his oldest son, J.J., played by Jimmy Walker. J.J.'s catchphrase, "Die no might," had become a national sensation, and the show began to focus more on his goofy antics. Amos felt this minstrel show persona was stereotypical and detracted from the show's potential to portray a realistic, dignified black family. He was very vocal about his concerns. Needless to say, the producers didn't appreciate the criticism. As it turns out, you can't fight the boss and expect to win. Amos was told his contract would not be renewed, and the writers were instructed to write him off the show in a definitive way. His character's sudden passing left a massive hole in the series. Esther Roll, who played Florida, was so devastated by the decision that she herself left the show for a season. Good Times limped on for a few more years, but without its strong father figure, it had lost its emotional center. The departure of James Evans remains a powerful example of how creative battles can have heartbreaking consequences on screen. Losing a family's strong father figure is one kind of grief. But what about losing its gentle, loving heart? Our next story is about the quiet, off-screen farewell of a TV mom who was, in many ways, the mother to us all. 3. Edith Bunker.
Well, put that phone down.
I am going to make the call.
Put the phone
I am going to make this call.
Put the phone down, damn it!
For nearly a decade, Edith Bunker was the beating heart of All in the Family, a groundbreaking sitcom that tackled America's most divisive issues through the eyes of a working-class family in Queens. Played by the brilliant Jean Stapleton, Edith was the long-suffering, kind-hearted, and deceptively wise wife of the bigoted loudmouth Archie Bunker. She was his dingbat, a sweet soul whose simple logic often cut through Archie's tirades with profound clarity. Where he brought fire, she brought grace. She listened when he shouted. And somehow, without ever raising her voice, she taught us all how to be a little bit better. When All in the Family officially ended in 1979, it didn't really end. The network, eager to keep the ratings goldmine going, persuaded Carol O'Connor to continue in a new series, Archie Bunker's Place. The show shifted its focus from the bunker living room to Archie's neighborhood tavern. It was essentially a continuation, picking up right where the old show left off. But behind the scenes, Jean Stapleton was ready to move on. She felt she had explored every possible facet of Edith's character and was ready for new challenges. She agreed to appear in a handful of episodes in the first season of Archie Bunker's Place, but she made it clear that would be it. She wanted to avoid being typecast forever as the sweet but simple Edith. The producers were faced with a dilemma. How do you say goodbye to a character as beloved as Edith Bunker? They chose a path of quiet dignity and profound sadness. When Season 2 premiered with a 2-part episode titled Archie Alone, viewers learned that Edith had passed away in her sleep from a stroke. There was no dramatic on-screen moment. It happened off-screen, between seasons, leaving Archie and the audience to grapple with the silent, empty space she left behind. The episode focuses on Archie's clumsy, heartbreaking attempts to deal with his grief. He's in denial, lashing out at everyone and refusing to accept that his Edith is gone. The climax of the episode is a quiet, devastating scene where Archie is alone in their bedroom. He finds one of Edith's slippers left under the bed. He picks it up, holds it, and finally breaks down, talking to her as if she were there. "It wasn't supposed to be like this," he sobs. "I was supposed to be the first one to go." Carol O'Connor's performance was so powerful, so raw, that he won a Peabody Award for it. It was a tour de force of acting that transcended comedy and became a universal portrait of grief. The decision to handle Edith's departure this way was a testament to the character's importance. Rather than recasting her or having her simply move away, they gave her and her millions of fans a real, albeit painful, sense of closure. It was a rare moment of emotional truth in a sitcom era that usually shied away from such topics, and it remains one of the most moving farewells in TV history. Edith's ending was driven by an actor's desire for a graceful exit. Our next story, however, is about a TV mom whose departure was anything but graceful, born from one of the ugliest public feuds in Hollywood. 4. Valerie Hogan.
If you see her again, I'll kill you in your sleep.
What are you talking about?
What am I talking about? She's, well, for starters, the laugh. I thought she was wounded.
In the landscape of 1980s family sitcoms, Valerie was a solid hit. Premiering in 1986, the show starred the talented and beloved Valerie Harper as Valerie Hogan, a working mom juggling her career and raising 3 rambunctious boys while her airline pilot husband was often away. Harper was a TV icon, famous for her role as Rhoda Morgenstern. Her presence gave the show instant credibility and warmth. Valerie Hogan was the quintessential 80s mom, patient, loving, and the stable center of her family's chaotic world. For 2 seasons, everything was going great. Then it all came crashing down. When viewers tuned in for the Season 3 premiere in 1987, they were met with a shocking announcement. The episode opened with the Hogan boys and their dad getting ready for a new school year. But something was wrong. Valerie was nowhere to be seen. The family talks in hushed, sad tones until the devastating truth is revealed. Valerie Hogan had perished in a car accident over the summer. Wait, what? The loving mom, the title character, the star of the show, was just gone? In her place, the show introduced Sandy Duncan as the husband's sister, who moves in to help raise the boys. The show was even retitled, first to Valerie's family, the Hogans, and then simply to the Hogan family. This wasn't a tearful goodbye, it was a cold, off-screen removal. So what on earth happened? Truth be told, this wasn't a creative decision. It was the explosive result of a nasty contract dispute. Behind the scenes, Valerie Harper and her husband, a producer on the show, were in a heated battle with the production company over her salary and creative input. Negotiations got ugly, with accusations flying from both sides. Here's the kicker. The company, Lorimar Telepictures, decided they had had enough. They fired Valerie Harper from her own show. In a stunning power move, they decided the show could go on without its star, so her character's journey was brought to an abrupt and tragic close. It was a ruthless business decision played out in the public eye. Harper didn't take it lying down. She sued for wrongful termination, and after a highly publicized trial, she won, receiving a hefty settlement and a share of the show's profits. It was a major victory for her, but it didn't bring her character back. For the audience, it was incredibly jarring. We were asked to accept that this loving family had lost its matriarch, and then, just a few scenes later, to laugh at the wacky antics of her replacement. To its credit, the Hogan family managed to survive for 4 more seasons, but the shadow of Valerie's sudden departure always lingered. Valerie Hogan's story was a case of a star being pushed out. But what happens when a star becomes so popular that her demands lead to one of the most awkward character phase-outs ever seen? 5. Chrissy Snow.
Hello? Janet, what took you so long to answer the phone? I was getting Cindy out of her wedding gown. Isn't her husband supposed to do that? She's not married.
Three's Company was the undisputed king of jiggle TV in the late 70s and early 80s. The premise was simple and scandalous for its time. 2 single women, Janet and Chrissy, share an apartment with a single man, Jack Tripper, who has to pretend he's gay, so their snoopy landlord, Mr. Roper, will allow the arrangement. The show was a festival of slapstick, innuendo, and misunderstanding, and its breakout star was Chrissy Snow. Played by Suzanne Summers, Chrissy was the stereotypical dumb blonde. She was sweet, naive, and took everything literally, leading to most of the show's hilarious mix-ups. With her signature snort laugh and pigtails, Chrissy became a massive pop culture phenomenon. Summers was on the cover of magazines, her posters adorned bedroom walls, and she was the undisputed fan favorite. By the 5th season, she was a certified superstar. And that's when the trouble started. Feeling that her popularity was the main reason for the show's massive success, Suzanne Summers and her husband-manager demanded a colossal pay raise. She wanted to be paid on par with television's biggest male stars, like Alan Alda. From a business perspective, it made some sense. From the network's perspective, it was unthinkable. ABC, along with co-stars Joyce DeWitt and John Ritter, saw the show as an ensemble. They flatly refused her demands. The contract dispute became a bitter public war. Instead of firing her outright, the network decided to play hardball. They systematically phased her out of the show. In Season 5, Chrissy's screen time was dramatically reduced. Her character would appear for a brief 60-second scene at the very end of each episode, usually phoning home to the apartment from her sick mother's bedside. These scenes were filmed on a separate soundstage, away from the rest of the cast. It was awkward, it was clunky, and it completely destroyed the show's chemistry. Finally, her character was written out for good, replaced by her clumsy cousin, Cindy Jenilee Harrison, and later by the smarter nurse, Terry Priscilla Barnes. But the magic was never quite the same. The public firing of Suzanne Summers and the clumsy handling of Chrissy's exit left a sour taste in many fans' mouths. It fractured the on-set relationships, with John Ritter being the only cast member who tried to maintain contact with Summers for years. Unlike other shocking exits, Chrissy Snow didn't meet a tragic end. She just faded away. Her departure is a classic Hollywood cautionary tale about the clash between art and commerce. It showed how quickly a network could turn on its biggest star and how a beloved character could be reduced to a contractual obligation before disappearing entirely. Chrissy's exit broke up a famous trio, but our next story involves the sundering of one of TV's most iconic duos, leaving one half of the team to go it alone. 6. Laverne DeFazio.
What do you suggest I do? Flap my arms real hard and head toward the window? Well, just try to get to the door.
For 7 seasons, Schlemiel, Schlemazel, Hasenpfeffer Incorporated, was the joyful call sign for one of TV's most beloved comedies, Laverne and Shirley. A spin-off from Happy Days, the show followed 2 best friends and roommates, Laverne DeFazio, Penny Marshall, and Shirley Feeney, Cindy Williams, as they navigated life, love, and their jobs at the Schatz Brewery in the 1950s, Milwaukee. They were the ultimate female friendship duo, Laverne, the cynical, tough-talking one, and Shirley, the bubbly, idealistic one. Their chemistry was electric, and their slapstick adventures made them superstars. The show was a ratings behemoth for years, but as it headed into its 8th season, the magic began to fizzle. Behind the scenes, there were growing tensions. Penny Marshall had become pregnant in real life, and her brother, legendary producer Gary Marshall, struggled with how to handle it on the show. At the same time, Cindy Williams married and also became pregnant. She claimed the producers were trying to force her to work up until her due date, a situation she found unacceptable. The conflict came to a head, and Cindy Williams abruptly left the show. The writers were left scrambling. In the 2nd episode of Season 8, Shirley meets and quickly marries a man named Walter Meany. Just like that, she was gone, having moved away with her new husband. This left Laverne without her Shirley. The show was retitled simply Laverne, and it limped through one final awkward season with Laverne on her own, surrounded by the supporting cast. But let's be honest, Laverne and Shirley without both Laverne and Shirley just didn't work. The core dynamic, the friendship that was the entire heart of the show, was gone. The departure of Shirley Feeney was a shock to the audience. It wasn't a dramatic passing, but it was the end of an era. It was like watching Abbott without Costello, or Martin without Lewis. The show that had been built on the foundation of 2 inseparable best friends was suddenly cut in half. The series was quietly canceled after that final strange season, a muted end for what was once the most popular show in America. It was a stark reminder that even the strongest on-screen friendships are no match for real-life backstage drama. Breaking up a beloved duo is one way to shock an audience. But sometimes, the biggest jolt comes from giving a hated villain an ending so bizarre, it becomes legendary. 7. Rosalind Shays.
For staying with a man who doesn't love you.
I really don't want to talk about it.
Okay, for this one, we have to step out of the sitcom world and into the high-stakes, high-drama universe of the 1980s legal powerhouse, L.A. Law. While not a comedy, the ending of this particular character was so shocking, so darkly humorous, and so utterly unforgettable that it's earned its place in the pantheon of shocking TV exits. In its 5th season, the show introduced one of the most formidable and despised villains in TV history, Rosalind Shays. Played with icy perfection by Diana Muldaur, Rosalind was a ruthless, brilliant, and utterly amoral attorney brought in to whip the firm into financial shape. She was a shark in a power suit. She had no time for feelings and a terrifying talent for corporate backstabbing. Viewers loved to hate her. Her reign of terror culminated in her ousting the firm's senior partner, Leland Mackenzie, and taking over. It seemed like she had won. And then came the episode, Good to the Last Drop. The scene is simple. Rosalind and Leland are walking down a hallway, stopping in front of an open elevator shaft where maintenance is being done. They exchange a few words, and Leland walks away. Rosalind turns to step onto what she thinks is the elevator. But the elevator isn't there. With a small, almost comical whoop sound, she simply steps into the empty shaft and plunges downward. Ding. That was it. One of the most powerful characters on television was dispatched by a simple workplace accident. The writers felt a dramatic demise wouldn't suit her. She was a force of nature, undone by simple bad luck. The reaction was stunned shock mixed with delighted laughter. It was so unexpected that you couldn't help but be impressed by the sheer audacity of it, proving that sometimes the most shocking way to write off a character is to do it with a wink and a shove. Rosalind's ending was a planned, creative shock. But what happens when a show is forced to write an ending because of a real-life tragedy? Our next story is about a beloved sitcom character whose departure was handled with incredible grace. 8. Coach Ernie.
The one with Clark Gable or Gary Cooper?
Wow, I'm 85. What's your excuse?
Baseball.
For its first 3 seasons, Cheers wasn't just a bar, it was a family. And at the heart of that family was Coach Ernie Pantuso. Played by the wonderful Nicholas Colasanto, Coach was the bar's original bartender, a sweet, gentle, and profoundly dim-witted man who had been Sam Malone's baseball coach. He was the show's lovable grandpa, famous for his hilariously muddled stories. His brain might have taken a few too many baseballs to the head, but his spirit was pure. During the 3rd season, the cast noticed that Nicholas Colasanto's health was failing. A long-time heart condition was getting worse. Tragically, in February 1985, he passed away from a heart attack. The show was now faced with an incredibly difficult task. They chose to handle it with grace and emotional honesty. The Season 4 premiere, Birth, Death, Love, and Rice, introduced a new character, Woody Boyd Woody Harrelson, who had come to Boston to meet his pen pal, Coach. Throughout the episode, the characters gently avoid telling Woody the truth. Finally, Sam sits him down and explains that Coach passed away a few months ago. There's no shocking reveal. It's handled quietly and tenderly. The episode's most powerful moment comes when Sam looks at a picture of Geronimo that Coach always treasured. Sam straightens the picture, a simple gesture that says everything about his love for his old friend. The passing of Coach Ernie Pantuso wasn't a plot device. It was a real-world tragedy that a TV show handled with incredible class, allowing the audience to grieve along with the cast. The Cheers cast and crew had to say goodbye to one beloved member. But what happens when lightning strikes twice and another acclaimed sitcom faces the devastating loss of one of its comedic geniuses? 9. Bill McNeil.
What I'm talking about is a full-scale revolt. Dave's gone too far this time. Imagine an office without snacks.
News radio, which ran from 1995 to 1999, was the definition of a cult classic. It was a brilliantly written, perfectly cast workplace comedy about the eccentric staff of a New York City AM news radio station. The ensemble was stacked with talent, but one of its brightest lights was the legendary Phil Hartman, who played the pompous, insecure, and hilariously egotistical news anchor, Bill McNeil. Bill was a masterpiece of comedic character creation. He was arrogant, petty, and constantly scheming, yet Hartman imbued him with a strange, undeniable likability. His silver-tongued delivery and unparalleled ability to switch from gravitas to absurdity in a heartbeat made him the show's comedic anchor. The show was a playground for Hartman's immense talents. Then, in May 1998, between the show's 4th and 5th seasons, the unthinkable happened. Phil Hartman's life was tragically cut short in a shocking act of domestic violence. The cast, crew, and the entire entertainment world were left reeling from the loss of a comedic giant and a genuinely beloved man. The show, which was already renewed for a 5th season, had to confront an impossible reality. How could they possibly go on without Phil? And how could they address the absence of Bill McNeil? They chose to face the tragedy head-on in the Season 5 premiere, an episode simply titled Bill. The episode opens with the news that Bill McNeil has passed away from a sudden heart attack. The rest of the episode follows the WNYX staff as they each grapple with the news in their own way. It is a masterwork of television, seamlessly blending profound sadness with the show's signature quirky humor. Each character gets a moment to express their grief, from Matthew's childlike confusion to Jimmy James's stoic denial. They read letters from Bill's many, many ex-wives and try to make sense of a world without their biggest personality. The episode is not just about the characters mourning Bill, it's about the actors mourning Phil. The tears, the sad smiles, the palpable sense of loss, it's all real. In one particularly poignant scene, Joe Rogan's character breaks down, saying, "It's just not fair," a line that clearly speaks for everyone on set. The episode ends with the staff quietly returning to their work, the empty space in their newsroom hanging in the air. As a final tribute, the show brought in Hartman's close friend and former SNL castmate, John Lovitz, to join the cast, not as a replacement, but as a new character to help fill the void. It was a beautiful, heartbreaking, and funny farewell to a true genius. From a death handled with grace, we now turn to one that was so confusing and controversial, the show eventually had to undo it completely. 10. Dan Connor.
I think we've grown together, Hope.
We gotta go on a diet.
What's this wee jazz? My pants fit fine.
For 9 seasons, Roseanne was a mirror reflecting the lives of a blue-collar American family with unflinching honesty. At the center was the partnership between Roseanne and Dan Connor. Played by the legendary John Goodman, Dan was the quintessential TV dad of the 90s. He was a loving husband and a devoted father who was gruff on the outside but had a marshmallow heart. The relationship between Roseanne and Dan was the show's anchor. Then came season 9, and everything got weird. The Connors win the lottery, and the show, always grounded in reality, became a bizarre fantasy. But the biggest shock was saved for the very last episode. Roseanne reveals in a voiceover that the entire season was a lie, a story she wrote to cope with a devastating reality. Dan hadn't survived the heart attack he suffered at the end of season 8. He had actually passed away. Let that sink in. The character we had just watched for a whole season had been a ghost of memory the whole time. It was a gut-wrenching, depressing, and deeply controversial ending that left audiences feeling cheated. For over 20 years, that was the official ending. And then, in 2018, the show came back. When the Roseanne revival premiered, the very first scene addressed the elephant in the room. Roseanne walks into the bedroom and wakes up a very much alive Dan Connor. With a single line of dialogue about her crazy book, one of the most shocking departures in sitcom history was completely erased. At the end of the day, the creators realized Roseanne without Dan just isn't Roseanne. His demise remains a fascinating case study, a shocking ending that was so unpopular, the show eventually had to perform a resurrection.